All right, today we're diving into one of history's most intense and, honestly, brutal love stories. It's a tale from 14th century Portugal, where it's kind of hard to tell where the shocking reality ends and the gruesome myth begins.
So, this is the big question, right? The one at the absolute heart of our story. I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a Gothic fantasy novel, but it's a question that's actually rooted in the history of the Portuguese monarchy. Could a king really make his dead lover a queen?
The legend is just unforgettable. It's an image so powerful, it's pretty much overshadowed history itself. You have this vengeful king, totally consumed by grief, who has his lover's body dug up, puts her on the throne, and then forces his terrified nobles to pledge their loyalty by kissing her dead, decaying hand. To find the truth behind this incredible wild tale, we've got to go back, way back to the beginning.
So first, to even begin to understand the legend, we have to understand the life that led to it. And at the center of this whole story are two people whose love would go on to defy a king and really change an entire nation.
Okay, so on one side you've got Prince Pedro. He's the heir to the Portuguese throne, the son of the very powerful King Afonso IV. And on the other side we have Inês de Castro. She's a noblewoman from Galicia who comes to Portugal as a lady-in-waiting for Pedro's own wife. I mean, you can already see the drama building, right? It's the perfect setup, a future king and a well-connected woman thrown together in a way that pretty much guaranteed something was going to happen.
And, just to make things even more complicated, they were related. They were third cousins, which meant that any marriage between them was a huge no-no, according to the church, unless you got a special pass from the Pope himself. This little family connection is going to become a massive roadblock in their story.
So, it's no surprise that their affair quickly exploded into a public scandal, putting the prince on a collision course with his father, the king.
And this scandal built up over more than a decade. So in 1339, Pedro marries Constanza, but the affair with Inés starts almost right away. 5 years later, his father, King Afonso, has had it. He exiles Inés to a castle in Castile to try and end it. But then, just a year later, Pedro's wife dies. And what does he do? He completely defies the king and brings Inés right back. For the next 10 years, their relationship is just this ticking political time bomb, and it all ends with her murder in 1355.
And look, this wasn't some secret affair anymore. Not at all. Pedro and Inés moved to Coimbra and lived completely out in the open. As a family, they had 4 children together. This was a public act of defiance against the crown, and it wasn't just a personal scandal. Everybody saw it as a serious political threat. The king and his court finally decided that the only way to solve the Inés problem was to get rid of her, permanently. Now this is a really crucial point. This wasn't just about a disapproving father being angry about his son's love life. King Afonso and his advisors saw Inés's powerful family, the Castros, as a genuine threat. They were terrified that her brothers and her father would use their connection to Pedro to try and make a grab for the Portuguese throne, especially if her sons were seen as legitimate heirs.
So, on this horrible day in January 1355, while Prince Pedro was away on a hunting trip, 3 assassins sent by the king showed up at the palace. Their names were Pedro Coelho, Álvaro Gonçalves, and Diogo Lopes Pacheco. They found Inés there with her children, and even though she begged for her life, they murdered her in cold blood.
Legend has it that King Afonso was actually there and that he hesitated for a moment, moved by the sight of his own grandchildren. But when the assassins pushed him, he tragically gave in, leaving the room with the words, "Do as you wish." What a devastating choice, right? Pitting his duty as king against his role as a grandfather, a choice that would end up tearing his kingdom apart.
So yeah, the murder didn't solve a political problem. It just created a much bigger one. It transformed Prince Pedro from a lover into an absolute instrument of vengeance.
Pedro's reaction was immediate, and it was explosive. Completely consumed with grief and rage, he raised an army and declared war on his own father. Think about that. The murder of one woman plunged the entire kingdom of Portugal into a civil war that raged for months, until Pedro's mother, the queen, finally managed to broker a very fragile peace. But Pedro, he never forgot. When his father died 2 years later and he became King Pedro I, his hunt for the assassins was on. He captured 2 of them, Coelho and Gonçalves, and at a public banquet, a feast that was supposed to be a celebration, he subjected them to one of the most gruesome executions you'll ever hear about.
He ordered their hearts to be literally torn from their bodies while they were still alive. One from the chest, the other from the back. He claimed that men who killed an innocent woman couldn't possibly have hearts. This brutal act is what earned him the name Pedro the Cruel, though for some he became Pedro the Just. So, with his revenge complete, Pedro turned his attention to securing Inés's legacy. And this right here is where history and myth truly start to blend together.
So back to that first question. Could a dead woman become queen? Well, in a way, yes. In 1360, in a completely bold and unheard-of move, Pedro made a sworn public declaration. He said that he had secretly married Inés years before, and since the word of a king was law, that was that. She was officially and legally recognized as the Queen of Portugal, 5 years after she had been murdered.
A year later, he gave his queen the ceremony she never had in life. He had her body exhumed and transported in this magnificent funeral procession. Thousands of nobles lined the route with candles, all to see her laid to rest in a specially built tomb in the royal monastery. And this grand, very real spectacle is almost certainly the seed from which that more grotesque coronation legend grew.
So you can see how the fact started to morph into legend. The historical reality was a solemn, grand funeral procession. The popular legend twisted that into a horrifying coronation scene. The royal tombs, which were originally placed side by side, were reimagined to be face to face so that the two lovers could rise and see one another on Judgment Day. And her death even inspired myths of a fountain born from her tears, with its algae stained red forever by her blood. I guess because sometimes a romantic myth just feels more powerful than a simple, tragic fact. This story became so deeply ingrained in Portugal's identity that it was immortalized in the country's national epic poem, the Lusíads. The poet Luís de Camões summed up her incredible fate with this one famous line, who after being dead was queen. We remember Pedro and Inés not just for the historical facts, but for the powerful, gruesome, and deeply romantic legend that grew from them. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Which is more enduring in the end, the history that actually happened, or the story we all choose to tell?